The sermon that changed everything. The chapel was more crowded than usual on Tuesday, May 27th, 2025, at 7:21 p.m. as the evening service began. Daniel sat in his familiar pew near the front, the wooden bench creaking softly under his weight. The air carried the faint scent of polished wood and the warmth of flickering candles, a comforting ritual that had become his refuge over the past weeks. But tonight, his heart felt heavier than ever. The struggle with lust that had driven him to his knees each night still burned within him, a persistent ache he couldn't shake. The events of the past days, his desperate note in the Bible, Sarah's thoughtful replies, Eli's confession, and the verses that seemed to follow him, had stirred a fragile hope, but doubt lingered like a shadow. The congregation hushed as the pastor, a kind-faced man in his late 50s, with a voice that carried both authority and gentleness, stepped to the pulpit. His name was Pastor Thomas, a figure Daniel had always admired from a distance, but never dared approach with his private struggles. The pastor adjusted his glasses and opened his Bible, the pages rustling softly in the quiet. "Tonight," he began, "we'll talk about temptation, something every one of us faces, whether we admit it or not." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The word temptation felt like a spotlight on his soul. He glanced around, half expecting the other parishioners to turn and stare, but they sat in attentive silence, their faces a mix of curiosity and reverence. Pastor Thomas continued, his voice steady and warm. "The Bible tells us in James 1:13 that God does not tempt us. Let's be clear on that. But he does allow trials to come our way, not to break us, but to refine us. Like gold in a fire, our faith is purified through the heat of struggle." The words pierced Daniel like a blade. He thought of the verse he'd found in Story 1. "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial," and how it had planted a seed of hope. He remembered Eli's words from Story 3, likening the struggle to a forge that shapes the will, and Sarah's notes from Stories 2 and 4, suggesting that God allows these battles to teach reliance and humility. Now the pastor's sermon seemed to weave those threads together, forming a tapestry of meaning that Daniel couldn't ignore. Pastor Thomas leaned forward, his eyes scanning the congregation with a knowing compassion. "Temptation isn't the sin," he said, his voice softer now, as if speaking to each person individually. "It's what we do with it that matters. God allows these trials to teach us to trust him, to turn to him even when the fire feels unbearable. He's not punishing you. He's preparing you." Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. The shame he'd carried for so long, the belief that his lustful thoughts made him unworthy, began to crack under the weight of those words. Could it be true? Was God not condemning him, but guiding him through this struggle? The pastor flipped to another passage, 1 Corinthians 10:13. "No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear." "You're not alone," Pastor Thomas said, his voice rising with conviction. "Your struggle isn't unique, and it isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're human, and that God trusts you to choose him in the midst of it." Daniel's hands tightened around the small cross pendant Eli had given him, its cool metal a grounding reminder of the stranger's encouragement. He thought of Sarah's note quoting Romans 7:15, "I do not understand what I do," and how even the Apostle Paul had wrestled with his own desires. As the sermon continued, Daniel's mind replayed the moments that had led him here. The candlelit nights of desperate prayer, the notes exchanged with Sarah, and Eli's confession had all pointed him toward this moment. The pastor's words felt like a key unlocking a door he hadn't realized was there. "God allows the battle to teach you trust," Pastor Thomas said, echoing Sarah's earlier note. "Your desires aren't the sin, it's your choices that define you." The statement hit Daniel like a wave, washing away some of the guilt that had clung to him for so long. He had spent years begging for the desires to disappear, but what if the true victory lay in choosing God despite them? The service ended with a hymn, the congregation's voices rising in harmony, but Daniel barely heard it. His mind was racing, his heart a mix of relief and resolve. As the others filed out, their murmurs of conversation fading into the night, Daniel approached Pastor Thomas, his steps hesitant but determined. The pastor turned, his face lighting up with a gentle smile. "Daniel," he said warmly, "it's good to see you. What's on your mind?" Daniel's mouth felt dry, but he forced the words out, his voice trembling. "I've been struggling with lust," he admitted, the confession spilling out like a dam breaking. "I've prayed for it to go away, but it doesn't. I feel like I'm failing God." The vulnerability of the moment made his chest tighten, but Pastor Thomas's expression didn't change. There was no judgment in his eyes, only understanding. The pastor placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder, his touch steady and reassuring. "You're not failing, son," he said softly. "You're fighting, and that's what matters. God doesn't expect perfection. He wants your heart. Your struggle is real, but so is his grace." He paused, then added, "Keep coming to him. Keep choosing him. That's where your strength lies." Daniel nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek as the weight of shame began to lift. He left the chapel that night with a new resolve, the pastor's words echoing in his mind alongside Eli's and Sarah's. The fire of his desires still burned, but for the first time, he felt equipped to face it, not by erasing it, but by choosing God in the midst of it. The cross pendant in his pocket felt heavier now, not with burden, but with purpose. As he stepped into the cool night air, the stars above seemed a little brighter, a quiet reminder that the light he sought was closer than he'd ever realized.